In the heart of Kaduna stood Royal Mercy Hospital, a place where ambition echoed louder than compassion. Doctors hustled, administrators flaunted connections, and the nurses competed for favor with whoever held power. But among them was one woman who seemed untouched by the noise. Naya Okoye. Every morning before sunrise, she walked quietly through the hospital gate with her small lunchbox and a folded umbrella. She was always the first to clock in, often hours before her shift began. While others dabbed makeup and scrolled through their phones, she disinfected trolleys, checked charts, and whispered prayers under her breath. By the time the city stirred awake, her ward already gleamed with quiet order. Her colleagues called her Sister Dull. Some even joked that she must live inside the hospital. She didn't argue. She simply smiled, offering help even to those who laughed behind her back. To Naya, kindness wasn't a competition. It was duty. Her life was simple: work, prayer, and long walks home to a one-room apartment behind the staff quarters. No jewelry, no social media filters, no secret admirers. Just the soft hum of her fan at night and her mother's voice in memory. Clean hands, Naya. Clean heart. That's how heaven notices you. It was a voice she lived by, even when the world didn't. That Wednesday evening began like any other, the sun heavy and the air full of dust. Inside the nurses' lounge, the chatter was louder than usual. "Have you heard?" Nurse Ada said, eyes wide. "They're expecting someone from the presidential office, a big man, seriously ill. Management says no mistakes tonight." Instantly, the ward buzzed with nervous excitement. The younger nurses touched up their lipstick, others polished shoes or straightened uniforms. Everyone wanted to be seen when the important patient arrived. But Naya didn't move. She was in Ward 3, helping a cleaner's wife swallow her medicine. "VIP or not," she murmured, "fever doesn't wait." Minutes later, as thunder cracked across the sky, the hospital's intercom came alive. "Emergency incoming! Prepare the VIP unit!" Rain began to fall, hard and angry, slapping against the glass windows. The air shifted. A storm outside, another one on its way in. At the reception, chaos unfolded. A convoy of black SUVs screeched to a halt, headlights cutting through the downpour. Men in dark suits jumped out first, scanning the area like soldiers. Behind them, a stretcher was wheeled out. A man motionless, oxygen mask pressed to his face. His once white caftan soaked in rain and blood. "Move aside, clear the hallway," shouted a voice. Nurses stumbled over each other to impress. Someone even sprayed perfume in the corridor to mask the antiseptic smell. The hospital matron rushed in, heels clicking like warning shots. When the stretcher passed, Naya caught a glimpse of the patient's face. The gray beard, the sharp lines, the deep scar near his brow. He was a man who had seen power and paid for it. She didn't know his name yet, but the others whispered it like a secret. Chief Alhaji Karim Bakare, billionaire oil magnate, the man whose handshake could change a country's economy. As the doctors stabilized him, orders flew in every direction: oxygen check, IV line, ECG monitor. The hallway throbbed with adrenaline. But amid the chaos, Naya worked quietly, her hands steady, her face calm. When others jostled for attention, she simply followed the rhythm of care she knew best. Wipe, check, record, repeat. "Why are you so calm?" a junior nurse whispered, trembling beside her. Naya answered softly, "Because the body obeys the heart. If the heart panics, the hands fail." Hours passed. The emergency lights dimmed. By midnight, most staff had gone to rest, leaving only the hum of machines and the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Rain still tapped against the windows. The city slept. Inside the ICU, Naya sat on a metal chair beside Chief Bakare's bed. His chest rose and fell weakly. A faint line of dried blood ran near his nostrils. She cleaned it gently, her movements careful and reverent. For the first time that night, his eyelids twitched. His voice was barely a whisper, cracked by pain. "Don't let them near me." Naya froze, unsure if he was delirious, but his hand reached out, trembling, clutching her wrist. His eyes, though heavy with exhaustion, carried a strange clarity. "Rest, sir," she said quietly. "You're safe here." He blinked once. Then slowly, he let go. Naya sat still, heart pounding. Outside, thunder rolled again, as if echoing something larger than the storm. In the dim light, she didn't yet know this moment, this fragile touch, would draw her into secrets buried deeper than any medical file. The next morning, people would whisper about the nurse who stayed when everyone else left, but by then, it would already be too late to turn back. The storm did not ease by morning, it only learned to whisper. Rain slid down the glass like tired tears as Royal Mercy Hospital prepared for what administrators called, with trembling importance, a sensitive admission. Emails flew, security badges were checked twice. The VIP unit, Room 7, was scrubbed again even though it already smelled like new metal and lemon disinfectant. Nurses adjusted wigs, straightened collars, and rehearsed smiles that were just bright enough to be noticed. The receptionist practiced saying, "Good afternoon, sir," to a lamp. Someone replaced the lilies in the corridor, not because flowers help patients breathe, but because they help wealthy visitors feel expected. The matron's heels tapped command across the tiles. Naya Okoye moved differently. No performance, no perfume. She reviewed medication lists, calibrated the infusion pump, and wrote baseline vitals on a sticky note that she placed at the head of the bed. She tucked the sheet corners so neatly a coin would have sprung from them. A hush spread when the convoy returned. Fewer sirens now, more certainty. 2 men in dark suits entered first, their jackets stiff with rain. Behind them, a doctor with a clipped tone summarized the night's chaos. On the stretcher lay the figure everyone had been whispering about, Chief Alhaji Karim Bakare, the magistrate of oil fields, the man whose photo sat on business magazine covers. Now pale under hospital light, he seemed reduced to the quiet argument between lungs and machine. "Room 7, the matron ordered. "Move." Carefully. They moved. Inside, monitors awoke with soft beeps. An ECG traced cautious hills. Oxygen hummed. A nurse tried to smooth Karim's sleeve as if crease lines could change prognosis. Another tilted the blinds for dramatic light that no one needed. Naya pulled the curtain halfway, not to hide him, but to protect the moment between patient and breath from the rest of the building. "Fluids ready?" the attending asked. "Set," Naya replied, voice steady. The attending physician, a calm woman with glasses that never fogged, checked numbers, then nodded. "Stabilized for now," she said. "No crowding. He needs quiet." Quiet lasted 5 minutes. Word travels. A senior administrator appeared with a visitor log. Security asked for a list of approved family. The legal office called twice. No one explained why. The matron returned to scold a junior nurse for crying, though the girl wasn't. Through it all, Naya charted without fuss, replacing worry with routine. By dusk, the hospital had the tired face of people pretending not to be afraid. The rain surrendered to a soft, cold breeze. Visiting hours ended. The corridor emptied. The world shrank to the hiss of oxygen and the rhythm of a distant generator. Naya stayed. She checked the cannula, moistened dry lips with a damp swab, and dimmed the overhead light. The man on the bed looked like a mountain taught humility, still grand, still present, but softened by clouds. Close up, the famous scar above his brow was simply a healed line, the body's modest declaration, "I outlived something once." Around midnight, the monitors clicked into their slow lullaby. Nothing urgent. nothing proud. Naya let her shoulders fall a few centimeters, the smallest mercy a body grants itself. She sat, folded her hands, and listened to the machinery keep time. A whisper broke it. Water. It was barely air shaped into a word. She leaned in. Sip slowly, sir. She guided the straw, counting silent seconds between swallows. His eyelids quivered, then opened, eyes the color of old coins underwater. He studied her face as if trying to place a song from long ago. Who are you? Naya, your nurse. His gaze didn't shift. Don't let them near me. The words landed like a lock clicking shut. Which them, sir? She asked softly, careful not to promise what she couldn't deliver. He paused, breath thinning. Staff. Family. The ones who smile, then sharpen. The corners of his mouth twitched. Maybe a laugh, maybe pain. Only you, he whispered. Only you stay. Naya glanced at the door, at the little square of window where the corridor light leaked in. You need rest. I'm here. He closed his eyes, but did not drift. People come when there is something to take, he murmured. Almost no one comes when there is only breathing to keep. She said nothing. Sometimes the kindest sentence is the one that never leaves the mouth. Minutes became an hour. The wall clock sounded louder at night, as if counting toward a verdict. Naya checked his vitals again. Stable. Fragile, but steady. She recorded numbers in the chart, then placed the pen down with the quietness of a prayer. He stirred. Naya, he said, the name clean in his mouth as though he'd practiced it in sleep. Do you believe in starting over? She met his eyes. No speech, no sermon. Yes. The smallest relief crossed his face, a shadow passing a lit doorway. Then I need yours. Before she could ask what that meant, a knock tapped the door, polite, then insistent. Naya stood, tension gathering in her neck. The viewing pane filled with the shape of a man in a tailored suit. He gestured at the door with the confidence of someone used to entering rooms he didn't own. I'll handle it, Naya whispered. She stepped into the corridor, drawing the door close behind her without a click. Room 7 is resting, she said gently. The man's tie was the sort that announces connections. I'm family, he replied, the word wrapped in entitlement. Open the door. Visiting hours are over. The consultant asked for quiet, Naya said, keeping her tone neutral enough to survive a complaint. He leaned closer. Do you know who is in there? I know, she said simply. A security officer approached, footsteps careful. Ma'am, everything okay? Room 7 is stable, Naya said. Patient requested minimal disturbance. The suited man gave a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. He requested privacy. To whom did he say that? He communicated it to nursing, Naya replied. And you are? He pressed. A nurse, she answered, because the job title was both truth and shield. He looked past her toward the bed, as if power could bend walls. He'll see me, he said finally. When he wakes. We'll ensure his safety, she said, because safety was the only promise she could legally make. When the man left, the security officer lingered. Want me to stay close? He asked. Please, Naya said. Quietly. She slipped back inside. Kareem's eyes were open, watching the door like a soldier who expected a flanking move. Naya didn't offer explanations he hadn't asked for. She just adjusted the blanket, checked the line, and drew the curtain. The clock kept writing minutes. Rain returned in a shy drizzle. Around 3 he woke again. They will come with papers, he said, words thin but pointed. They will call it care. It is not. Understood, Naya replied. She didn't ask which papers. Enough stories passed through hospitals to guess the shapes, Authorizations, transfers, signatures that unlock vaults. He searched her face. Whatever he saw there seemed to calm him. His fingers, cool and unsteady, reached for hers, not to be held long, but to confirm she was real. He exhaled, then let go. Outside, the corridor had settled into the strange peace that lives between midnight and morning, when even ambition lies down. Inside, room 7 felt like a small island cut from the map. Naya watched the green line crest and fall. She considered the question he had planted in the air, starting over, and wondered what soil could grow such a thing at his age, at his height. The answer did not arrive. Instead, another knock did. Softer this time, then a whisper through the door from the night registrar. "Nurse Naya?" Legal called again. "They want to confirm the list of bedside approvals at first light." Naya looked at the sleeping man, then at the red digital numbers on the monitor. Dawn was near. First light reveals what night lets hide. She pulled her chair a little closer and tightened the curtain's edge so the corridor glow couldn't reach his face. If storms speak in thunder, beginnings often speak in whispers. He had asked for hers. The sun, when it finally chose to rise, would demand an answer. The first light of dawn crept into Royal Mercy Hospital, spilling through the long hallway like a quiet intruder. The storm had finally retreated, leaving puddles that mirrored the pale sky. Inside room 7, the rhythmic beeps of the heart monitor were steady, fragile but alive. Naya Okoye hadn't slept. She sat on the same metal chair, her head slightly bowed, watching the faint rise and fall of Chief Alhaji Karim Bakare's chest. The night had been long, full of whispered instructions, shadowed knocks, and questions she didn't yet understand. She checked his vitals again. Blood pressure low, oxygen stable. The machines hummed like obedient servants. She took a small towel and gently wiped the sweat from his forehead. As she did, his eyes opened again, weak but awake. "You're still here," he murmured. "Yes, sir," she said softly. It's morning now. He looked toward the window where light painted thin lines across the curtains. "Morning," he repeated, as if testing the word. Then, after a pause, "They'll come soon." Naya didn't ask who. She already knew he meant his family, the same people he'd asked her to keep away. Just before 8 o'clock, footsteps echoed in the corridor. The matron entered briskly, holding a clipboard. "How's our patient?" "Stable," Naya replied. "Good. You can take a short break. His son is on the way." "I'd rather stay," Naya said. The matron glanced at her, curious. "He's not an easy man. You don't even flinch around him." "I just see a patient," Naya replied. The matron shook her head, half amused. "You're an odd one, Naya, but maybe that's why he likes you." Then she turned and left. Minutes later, voices rose outside. The sound of expensive shoes against the floor, the scent of designer cologne that didn't belong in a hospital. "Tell my father I'm here," said a man's sharp tone. "Now." Naya glanced toward the door. Before she could move, Chief Karim's eyes snapped open. "No," he said, voice firmer than before. "Don't let him in." "Sir, please," he whispered. "Not now." She hesitated, then nodded. When the door opened, she stepped forward quickly. "He's resting," she said. The man standing there looked barely in his 30s. Farouk Bakare, his eldest son. Perfectly pressed suit, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that grows only where power shields weakness. "He's my father," Farouk said flatly. "I'll decide when he rests." Naya didn't raise her voice. "He requested privacy." Farouk's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "His nurse." "Well, nurse," he said, stressing the word like an insult. "Don't forget your place." Before Naya could respond, A low voice from behind the curtain said, "She's exactly where she needs to be." Farouk froze. His father was awake. Naya stepped aside as Farouk approached, his tone softening. "Baba, it's me. Farouk." "I know who you are," Karim said. "You came early. Why?" "I was worried," Farouk replied. "You didn't answer calls. The company needs your signature for the new—" "Enough," Karim interrupted. "You came for papers, not for me." Farouk sighed. "That's not fair." "It's true," his father said. "Even now you're thinking of land, of titles, of what happens when I stop breathing." Farouk clenched his jaw. "You always think the worst of us." "Because I've seen it," Karim whispered. "Every smile that hides a knife." The silence in the room grew heavy. Naya stood near the monitors, pretending to review the IV drip, but she heard every word. Farouk turned toward her. "You can leave us," he said. "No," Karim said immediately. "If she leaves, you leave." Farouk's nostrils flared, but he obeyed. He gave his father a long, cold stare and then left, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the ICU like thunder. For a moment, the room was still again. Karim leaned back, eyes closed, breathing unevenly. Naya adjusted the oxygen flow and checked his pulse. "You shouldn't get angry," she said quietly. "It makes you weaker." He gave a faint, bitter smile. "Weakness began long before today, Nurse Naya." She hesitated. "Do you want to talk about it?" "Talk." He let out a dry laugh. "Talking never saved anyone. Listening did." She didn't reply, but she sat down again, her presence enough invitation. After a long pause, he said, "Do you know what it's like to have everything yet sleep as if the walls are whispering against you?" Naya thought carefully. "Maybe lonely." He nodded slowly. "Lonely," he repeated. "Yes, surrounded by people but alone with your sins." She glanced at him. "You believe in sin?" "I believe in mistakes," he said. "And I've made one that haunts every breath I take." He turned his head toward her. "You look at me without fear. Do you know who I am?" "Yes," she said. "You're Chief Karim Bakare, businessman, philanthropist." He smiled sadly. "Is that what they say? Then you don't know me at all." The machines beeped softly, marking his silence. After a while, he said, "I had a chance to choose love once. I chose power instead. I told myself it was for family, for legacy, but legacies built on betrayal don't last." His eyes glistened as he whispered, "And now I'm paying for it." Naya wanted to ask what he meant, but she sensed he wasn't ready. He turned his face toward the window again. "They'll all come now, lawyers, sons, cousins, acting like mourners while counting my properties. Watch them, nurse. Watch how grief turns into greed." She folded her hands in her lap. "I don't want to watch anyone's greed," she said softly. "I just want to see you get better." He looked at her, surprised, as if those simple words had reached a place medicine couldn't. For the first time since she met him, he smiled. Not as a tycoon, but as a tired man finally seen. "You're not like the others," he said quietly. "Clean hands, clean heart." Naya blinked, her throat tightening. That phrase, her mother's phrase. "How did you know to say that?" she asked, voice almost trembling. He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes, whispering something she barely heard. "Because I've met someone like you before." Outside, the rain had stopped, but a darker storm was gathering. In the corridor, Farouk was on his phone, pacing. "Keep an eye on that nurse," he muttered. "Something's off about her. Father's never trusted anyone that fast." And just like that, the quiet nurse from Kaduna had become the most watched woman in the hospital, though she didn't know it yet. Night returned to Royal Mercy Hospital, and with it came the kind of silence that feels rehearsed, the hush that follows an argument unresolved. The ICU lights glowed faintly blue, soft enough not to disturb the resting patient, yet bright enough to reveal every shadow in room 7. Naya Okoye sat where she always did, a sentinel in scrubs. Her body was still, but her mind was a field of questions. Every word Chief Karim Bakare had said kept echoing. "You're not like the others. I've met someone like you before." She looked at him now. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow, but something about his expression seemed unsettled, as if his dreams were full of old ghosts. Then, sometime past midnight, his fingers twitched. "Naya," he whispered. She leaned closer. "I'm here, sir." "Not sir," he murmured, voice hoarse. "Just Karim." She hesitated. "You should rest." He shook his head weakly. "I need to tell you something before they come again. Your family." A faint, sad smile. "Family. Yes, that's what they call themselves." He motioned toward the small table near his bed. Under there, the brown leather bag. Naya reached down and pulled it out. A worn satchel, its zipper stiff with age. She placed it on his lap. "Open it," he said. Inside was a photograph, a silver key, and a brown envelope thick with papers. The photo showed a young woman holding a baby. Her eyes gentle, her smile unguarded. "That's her," he said. "Zainab Musa, sir." Naya studied the picture quietly. "She's beautiful." "She was," Karim replied. "The only person who saw me before I became this." He pointed to the IV line in his arm. "Money buys everything except peace. I thought I was strong, but I was just afraid. Afraid of scandal, of what people would say. My family told me she wasn't good enough, that I'd lose everything if I stayed with her. And you believed them?" "I didn't just believe them," he said bitterly. "I obeyed them." He took a trembling breath. "When I left, she was carrying my child." Naya's heart stilled. "Your child?" He nodded. "A daughter. I sent her money once, through my lawyer, but the payment was rejected. After that, she disappeared. No one could find her. I tried years later, but it was too late. Everyone told me she'd moved to a small village, Kagera, in Niger State. I built a house there for her, but I never returned." He looked at the photo again, eyes wet. "Now, when I close my eyes, all I see is her face, and the child I never held." Naya wanted to speak, but no words felt right. She could only listen as his voice broke into fragments. "I want to make it right, Naya. Before I die, I need to know what happened to them, whether she forgave me, whether my daughter grew up hating my name." He gestured to the key in her hand. "That opens the house in Kagera. Inside there's truth, letters, maybe more. I want you to go there. Find what's left." Naya blinked in disbelief. "You want me to go?" "Yes," he said firmly, though his strength was fading. "Not my sons, not my lawyer. They'd destroy whatever they find. But you'll do it with clean hands." She gripped the key tightly. "Sir, I'm a nurse. I'm not—" "Not what?" he interrupted gently. "Not brave? You've sat beside me when everyone else ran. That's all the courage I need." Outside, a door slammed. The sound of footsteps, urgent, heavy, echoed down the corridor. Naya turned as the door opened. Farouk Bakari stepped in, his expression cold as marble. Behind him trailed a man in a grey suit carrying a briefcase. "Father," Farouk began smoothly, "I brought Mr. Adeoye. He just needs your signature on a few hospital authorizations." "I'm tired," Karim said. "It will only take a minute," Farouk insisted. Naya moved closer to the bed. "He needs rest. You can come back in the morning." Farouk shot her a glare. "I wasn't talking to you." "She's right," Karim said suddenly. His voice, though weak, carried authority. "Give the papers to her." "What?" Farouk blinked. "I said give them to Naya. She'll look at them first." The lawyer hesitated, unsure what to do. "Do as I say," Karim commanded. Reluctantly, the man handed Naya the folder. She placed it on the table without opening it. Farouk's face darkened. "You're letting a nurse handle legal matters now?" "She's the only one I trust," Karim said. "Father, this is madness," Farouk snapped. "You don't even know her." Karim turned his head slightly. "And I know you too well." The room froze. Farouk's jaw clenched, and for a moment it looked like he might speak again, but instead he turned and stormed out, the lawyer trailing behind him. The door slammed so hard the oxygen machine beeped in protest. Naya exhaled slowly, her pulse still racing. Karim's shoulders slumped back against the pillows. "You see," he whispered, "even now they come with papers, not prayers." She knelt slightly so she could meet his tired gaze. "If I go to Kagara," she said softly, "what do I tell her? What if she's still there?" He blinked back tears. "Tell her I never stopped thinking of her. Tell her I was a coward. Tell her—" He paused, searching for breath. "That I want to see our daughter's face before I close my eyes." Naya swallowed the lump in her throat. "And if she's gone, then find my daughter. She'll have my eyes and my curse." He coughed violently. Naya grabbed a tissue, supporting him until the fit passed. When he finally settled, he whispered, "Promise me, Naya. Promise you'll go." She hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. "I promise." He closed his eyes, his lips trembling into a faint smile. "Good. You should leave soon, before they realize what I've given you." "Realize? They already suspect," he whispered. "My sons, my cousin, even my lawyer. They know something's missing. If they find out about the key or the letter, they'll take it. Or worse." Naya's blood ran cold. "Why would they?" "Because the truth could cost them everything." The lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again. Naya looked at the envelope, the key, and the photograph. Her hands trembled as she slid them into her nursing bag. "I'll go at first light," she said. Karim nodded weakly. "Be careful." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her one last time. "Naya," he murmured, "when you find her, tell her I died remembering the sound of her laugh." She froze, her throat tightening. "You'll tell her yourself," she said, but even she didn't believe it. She left the room quietly, the rain whispering again outside. In her bag, the silver key glinted faintly, a small thing that carried a secret powerful enough to destroy an empire. The rain had softened into a drizzle by dawn, leaving the streets of Kaduna slick and shining. Naya Okoye stood by the hospital's back gate, her uniform replaced with a plain blue dress and scarf. In her small leather handbag rested 3 things: the silver key, the brown envelope, and the photo of Zainab Musa holding the baby. She had written a short message to the matron. "Family emergency. I'll return in 2 days." It was a lie, but the only kind that might save her job. As the city stirred awake, she made her way to Kawo Park, where the morning air smelled of exhaust, roasted corn, and impatience. Drivers shouted destinations over one another. "Mina, Bida, Kontagora." Zaria left side. She found her ride, an old Toyota bus with rust along its edges and the words "God Still Day" painted across the rear window. The conductor, a skinny teenager chewing gum, waved her in. "Kagara, Auntie?" "Yes," she said quietly. The bus jolted forward with a violent cough of smoke. Naya sat by the window, watching the city fade. Soon, the skyline of Kaduna dissolved into farmlands, palm trees, and long stretches of red soil. The air grew hotter, drier, more honest. For hours, she thought of nothing but the rhythm of the road, the way every bump seemed to beat in time with her pulse. Yet her thoughts refused silence. Who was Zainab, really? Did she still live in that house? And the daughter, Layla, he'd said. Could she still be alive, somewhere, unaware that her father lay dying? She pressed the photograph between her palms as if it could answer. By mid-afternoon, the bus stopped at a dusty sign that read, "Welcome to Kagara." Chickens scattered under the wheels. The air smelled of dust and boiled maize. Children ran barefoot beside the road, laughing freely. Laughter unbothered by politics or inheritance. When the conductor called "Last stop," she climbed down, the ground soft beneath her sandals. Kagara looked untouched by time. Mud brick houses stood in quiet rows. Zinc roofs flashed dull silver under the sun. Smoke rose from small cooking fires, and goats wandered lazily. Naya approached a food stall where an elderly man fried a kara under a faded umbrella. "Good afternoon, sir," she said. "Please, do you know anyone named Babatunde Ajayi?" He wiped his hands on a rag. "Babatunde, the caretaker?" "Yes." He pointed down a narrow path lined with mango trees. "Second house after the well. The green door." "Thank you." The path was quiet except for the hum of distant radio music and the occasional bleat of goats. She found the green door, knocked twice. A voice called from inside, rough but not unfriendly. "Who is it?" "My name is Naya," she said. "I came from Kaduna, from Chief Karim Bakare." The door opened slowly. The man standing there was in his 60s, dark skin and wiry, with hands that carried years of work. His eyes, however, were sharp, cautious. "You said Bakare?" he asked. "Yes, sir. He sent me." Babatunde studied her for a long moment, then opened the door wider. "Come in." Inside, the room was small but clean. Swept floors, a wooden table, and a single fan that groaned as it turned. A Bible lay open beside a transistor radio. "You look tired," he said. "Sit." She sat, clutching her bag. "Bakare is still alive?" "He's ill, in hospital. He asked me to find a house here." She took out the silver key and placed it on the table. Babatunde's eyes softened. "Yes, that's it. The house behind the old tamarind trees." He sighed deeply. "I kept it clean all these years. Once a week I sweep the yard. The woman who lived there was kind to everyone. Then one day she left. No goodbye. Just gone. She, Zainab Musa," he nodded. "She lived quietly. Never caused trouble. The villagers respected her. But she carried sorrow. You could see it in the way she walked." "What about her daughter?" Naya asked gently. He hesitated. "Little girl. Smart. Used to draw pictures on the wall, always asking questions. Then one morning, both gone. No one knows where." Naya's throat tightened. "May I see the house?" He looked at her as though weighing something invisible. Then he nodded. "Come." They walked through narrow paths where dry grass brushed against their legs. The heat pressed heavy, the kind that demands silence. Finally, they reached a compound behind tall bushes. A faded cream wall surrounded it, the gate rusted but intact. Babatunde unlocked it with a creak. The air inside felt different, still like time had stopped the day Zainab left. A neat footpath led to a modest bungalow. The veranda was swept, the steps washed clean. Babatunde's weekly devotion was clear. Naya placed the silver key into the door. It turned easily, as if waiting for her. When she stepped inside, a faint smell of dust and old soap filled the air. The furniture was simple. Wooden chairs, a brown sofa covered with crochet cloth, curtains faded by sunlight. Everything felt untouched yet alive, like a memory preserved. On a small shelf hung framed photos. Zainab sitting under a mango tree, Zainab holding her baby, and one where half a man's face had been torn away, only a sleeve and watch remaining. "She waited for him, didn't she?" Naya whispered. Yes, Baba Tunde said. For years. Naya walked slowly, her fingers brushing along a table polished by absence. Then she saw it. A door at the end of the corridor, locked. She kept that one closed, Baba Tunde said quietly. I never entered. Naya pulled the key from her pocket again and tried it. It clicked. When she pushed the door open, air heavy with time rushed out. The room was small, sun filtering through the curtain holes. On the wall hung a child's crayon drawings, a man, a woman, and a smiling girl with long hair. On the bedside table sat a small box. Inside it were tiny clothes, a one-eyed doll, and under them a stack of letters bound with a ribbon. Naya picked one and opened it. You left. I waited. I believed you'd come back. Each morning our daughter asks, "Where is Daddy?" And I tell her, "He's working. Maybe one day that lie will turn true." Naya's eyes blurred. She opened another. Your men came again. They offered money, but I will not trade our child for silence. Her hands shook. She turned to Baba Tunde. Did anyone ever deliver these? He shook his head. No one dared. She told me to keep them safe. Naya reached into the box again and found a folded birth certificate. Her breath caught. Name, Layla Zainab Bakare. Date of birth, 12th July 1994. Father, Alhaji Karim Bakare. Mother, Zainab Musa. Her vision wavered. She's real, she whispered. She exists. Baba Tunde peered at the paper, nodding slowly. Yes, that's the child. Naya stared at the document for a long time. Then, gently, she folded it and placed it back in her bag beside the photograph. I need to find her, she said. Baba Tunde frowned. Be careful, nurse. Some men came once, city men. They asked too many questions. When Zainab heard, she hid for days. Then she vanished. Do you know anyone who might know where she went? He hesitated. Maybe. Mama Ekaete Uduak, the midwife. She was like family to Zainab. If anyone knows, she does. Where can I find her? He pointed beyond the tamarind trees. 3 houses past the well. White wall, red goat tied in front. But go before dark. People here don't like strangers asking about old stories. Naya nodded. Thank you. Baba Tunde gave a small, tired smile. You carry heavy things in that bag, nurse. Make sure they don't break you. As the sun began to fall, painting Kagara gold and red, Naya stood in the doorway of the house. She looked once more at the child's drawings, at the scarf left on the chair, and at the faint outline of a woman who had waited too long. Then she locked the door, slipping the key into her pocket. The journey had begun as a favor for a dying man. Now it felt like a promise to a woman who had never stopped waiting. The sun in Kagara rose fast and merciless, turning red dust into gold powder that clung to every footprint. Naya Okoye stepped out of the compound where Zainab Musa once lived, her small bag heavy against her side. Inside it were the birth certificate, the letters, and the faint smell of old paper that now felt sacred. The caretaker, Baba Tunde Ajayi, walked a few steps ahead, his cap tilted low to block the glare. The village had already awakened. Women fetching water from the well, children chasing a tire down the dirt path, men hammering wood for market stalls. The air smelled of roasted yam and kerosene smoke. As they passed a row of houses, Baba Tunde pointed his walking stick toward one with peeling white paint and a red goat tied to a tree. That's her place, he said. Mama Ekaete Uduak. Midwife. She knew your Zainab like her own daughter. Naya nodded. You'll come in with me? He shook his head. Better you go alone. She talks more when strangers come politely. Naya understood. She approached the gate and knocked twice. A voice rasped from inside. Who is it? My name is Naya, she said. I came from Kaduna. I'm looking for Mama Uduak. The wooden gate creaked open. A small, wiry woman stood there, her head wrapped in a faded blue scarf, her eyes sharp as glass. "I'm Mama Uduak," she said. "What brings a city nurse to a quiet village like this?" "I came because of Zainab Musa," Naya answered softly. At that name, the old woman's face tightened. She looked at Naya from head to toe, then at Babatunde waiting a few steps away. "You came from him, didn't you?" she said. "Yes," Naya admitted. "From Chief Karim Bakare. He's very ill. He asked me to find Zainab." Mama Uduak's hands gripped her cane until her knuckles whitened. "Too late," she whispered. "Zainab has gone to meet her peace." The words hit Naya like a slap of wind. "Gone?" "Dead," the woman said, voice low but firm. 6 years now, buried near the old tamarind grove. For a moment, Naya couldn't breathe. She had imagined Zainab alive. Frail, maybe, but waiting somewhere, ready to forgive. Now the silence that hung between them was a grave in itself. "Please," Naya said quietly. "May I come in?" Mama Uduak nodded once and pushed the gate open wider. Inside, the small courtyard smelled of palm oil and drying herbs. A sewing machine sat near the window, its wheel rusted with disuse. The old woman lowered herself onto a wooden chair and pointed for Naya to sit. "You said Bakare sent you," she began. "After all these years?" "He's dying," Naya said. "He told me everything. That he left her, that she was carrying his child. He wanted me to find them." Mama Uduak laughed softly, the sound brittle. "Wanted to find them now?" Men like him always remember when their shadows grow longer than their pride. Naya lowered her gaze. "He said he never stopped thinking of her." The old woman looked away, her eyes glistening. Thinking is not the same as showing up. Zainab waited until her heart cracked from waiting. Even when she was angry, she prayed for him. Every dawn, she lit a candle and said, "May the man who broke me find peace." Can you imagine that? Naya swallowed hard. He said she was the only one who saw him before he became powerful. Mama Uduak gave a sad smile. She saw the boy inside the man. That was her mistake and her gift. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the red goat outside bleat lazily at the afternoon sun. Then Naya asked softly, "What about the daughter?" "Layla." At that, Mama Uduak straightened. Her sharp eyes returned. "Ah, so he told you about her?" "Yes. I found her birth certificate in the house." The old woman nodded slowly. "Layla is alive." Naya's pulse quickened. "Where is she?" "She left Kagara years ago," the woman said. "Didn't want her mother's grave to chain her to pain. Moved to the next town, opened a small clinic. Calls herself Layla Musa now. Refuses to use Bakare's name. Says she was born from a woman's courage, not a man's apology." Naya felt her throat tighten again. "He wants to see her," she said. "He knows he can't buy forgiveness, but he wants to speak before it's too late." Mama Uduak's eyes softened, but her voice carried steel. "And you think the child will just walk into his arms? You think she doesn't know the kind of man he was?" "She knows only half of him," Naya replied quietly. "But she deserves the truth, and so does he." The old woman leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling as if reading memories written there. "Truth," she murmured. "It's a sharp thing. You must hold it carefully." "I will," Naya said. Mama Uduak sighed, then reached beneath her wrapper and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She placed it on the table. "That's her clinic address," she said. "Grace Haven Medical, on the edge of Beda Road. She works mornings and closes by 5. Don't go at night. The roads aren't safe." Naya took the paper, hands trembling slightly. "Thank you, Mama." The old woman nodded but did not smile. "Tell her," she began, her voice softening. Tell her that Mama still prays for her every evening, and tell her Zainab's grave has fresh flowers every market day." "I will," Naya said. Before leaving, she hesitated at the door. "Mama, one more thing," she said. "When you said Zainab prayed for him, do you think she forgave him?" The old woman looked up, her eyes sharp again. "Forgiveness is not for the one who left. It's for the one who wants peace enough to let go. Yes, child, she forgave him, but she never forgot." Naya bowed her head. "He said he wants to fix what he broke." "Then may God help him," Mama Uduak said. "Because some things can only be fixed by truth, not time." Outside, the heat had softened into the kind of late afternoon glow that made even old walls look kind. Baba Tunde was waiting by the road. "She remembered her?" he asked. "Yes," Naya said, "and she gave me this." She showed him the folded address. He nodded slowly. "So you found what you came for?" "Not yet," she replied. "Now I must find the daughter." Baba Tunde looked at her carefully. "This road you walk, Nurse Naya, it's not straight. It bends around secrets and people who don't want them found." "I know," she said quietly. "But I gave my word." The old caretaker smiled faintly. "Then may your clean hands stay steady." As dusk settled over Kagara, Naya returned briefly to Zainab's old house. She stood on the veranda, looking at the faded curtains, at the drawings of flowers and suns left on the wall by a child long grown. The air smelled of dust and memory. She whispered to the empty room, "Your daughter's alive. I'll bring her to him, even if she doesn't want to come." The wind moved softly through the tamarind trees, rustling the leaves as though the woman in the ground was listening. That night, Naya packed again. The photograph, the letters, the birth certificate, and the small piece of paper with the address. She lay down on the narrow bed, but couldn't sleep. The ceiling above her seemed to hum with the voices of everyone she had met. Zainab's laughter in the photo, Mama Uduak's wisdom, and Karim's fragile, broken whisper, "Promise me." Before dawn, she rose, washed her face, and tied her scarf tight. She stepped out into the cool air, the horizon just beginning to glow orange. From behind her, Baba Tunde's voice called out softly, "Going so soon." "Yes, the sooner I find her, the sooner he can rest." He nodded. "Then may the road show you mercy." Naya smiled faintly, "And may truth do the same." She turned toward the dirt road that led out of Kagara, or toward a daughter who didn't yet know the storm waiting for her. The road from Kagara to Bida Road was narrow and half-broken, curling through dry hills and small farming villages where time moved slower than breath. Naya Okoye sat by the window of a passing bus, watching the landscape slide by. The millet fields, the herds of goats, the women balancing basins on their heads. The closer she came to Grace Haven Medical, the heavier the air felt. Not from heat, but from the weight of what she carried. The letters, the photo, and the birth certificate that could open old wounds, or heal them. She rehearsed what she might say. "Your mother loved you." Too sentimental. "Your father is dying." Too cruel. "He regrets everything." Too late. There were no good words for this kind of truth. By noon, the bus pulled up near a small market town where the sign, "Grace Haven Medical Clinic, Care Without Judgment," hung crookedly over a white-painted building. It wasn't large. 2 consultation rooms, a small pharmacy, and a waiting area shaded by a neem tree. But it was alive. Women with babies, farmers with bandaged hands, school children waiting for tetanus shots. All passed through the gate with quiet trust. Naya stepped out, smoothing her dress. Her heart pounded so hard it almost drowned the hum of traffic. Inside the clinic, a nurse in a green apron greeted her. "Good afternoon, Ma. You want to see Doctor?" "I'm looking for someone," Naya said. "Layla Musa." The nurse smiled proudly. "Ah, our madam. She's in with a patient. You can wait. Naya nodded, choosing a corner seat. The air smelled of antiseptic and soap. Clean, simple, honest. After a few minutes, the office door opened. A young woman stepped out, her white coat slightly wrinkled, her hair tied neatly under a scarf. She was around 30, tall, confident, with eyes that carried both gentleness and fatigue. Naya recognized her instantly, not from meeting her before, but from the photo in her bag. The same eyes, the same tilt of the chin as Zainab's. "Dr. Layla," the assistant called. "Someone here to see you." Layla turned, her voice calm but brisk. "Yes?" Naya stood, her palms damp. "Good afternoon. My name is Naya. I came from Kaduna, from Royal Mercy Hospital." Layla's brows knit. "Is someone sick?" "Yes," Naya said quietly. "A man named Chief Karim Bakare." For a heartbeat, the clinic went silent. Even the ceiling fan seemed to slow. Then Layla gave a small, cold laugh. "You came all the way here to tell me that name?" Naya hesitated. "You know him?" "I know of him," she replied sharply. "Everyone in Nigeria knows the Bakare name. Money, power, corruption. Why would a nurse from his hospital come here?" "Because he sent me," Naya said. "He's very ill and he—" Layla raised a hand. "Stop. Whatever he wants, tell him it's too late." Naya took a slow breath, then reached into her bag and pulled out the photograph, the one of Zainab holding baby Layla. She placed it gently on the table between them. Layla stared. The color drained from her face. Her fingers trembled as she touched the edge of the photo. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "From your mother's house in Kagara," Naya said softly. "She kept everything. The letters, the drawings, even your old doll." Layla's jaw tightened. "She told me never to look back. That man brought only pain." "I know," Naya said. "But he's dying. He doesn't want money or forgiveness, only truth. He wants to see you once before he leaves this world." Layla turned away, pacing. He had 30 years for truth. He chose silence. "Yes," Naya said. "But silence doesn't erase guilt. It only grows louder until someone answers it." Layla's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "When my mother was dying, she called his name," she said bitterly. "Not mine, not God's, his. I buried her with that pain. Why should I open it again?" "Because maybe," Naya said gently, "you deserve to close it properly." Layla stood still for a long moment. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "Does he even know what I look like?" Naya shook her head. "No, but he knows your eyes." The younger woman exhaled, a sound caught between anger and exhaustion. "I should hate him," she said. "But I don't even have the energy for that." Naya reached into her bag again and laid down the birth certificate, its edges yellowed with time. "He asked me to give you this. Proof that he never denied you, only failed you." Layla looked down. When she saw her name printed beside his, her face went blank, the kind of stillness only deep emotion can cause. "I'm not his daughter," she said softly. "I'm my mother's. I carry her strength, not his name." "And that strength," Naya said, "is exactly why he wants to see you." Layla sank into a chair, elbows on her knees, face in her hands. The clinic outside buzzed with life, children laughing, a generator rumbling. But inside, the air hung thick. Finally, she looked up. "If I go, it won't be for him," she said. "It'll be for her." "That's enough," Naya said. Layla exhaled shakily. "When?" "As soon as possible," Naya replied. "He's running out of time." Layla nodded slowly. "All right, but there are conditions." "Anything," Naya said. "No cameras, no lawyers, no press," Layla said firmly. "If I'm going to meet him, it'll be between a dying man and a forgotten child. Not a headline." "Agreed," Naya said. Layla gave a humorless laugh. You really believe he wants peace? I think he wants something smaller, Naya replied. Forgiveness. For the first time, Layla's expression softened. Forgiveness doesn't bring people back. No, Naya said, but it lets the living breathe again. That evening, as the sky darkened to burnt orange, Naya and Layla boarded a night bus heading toward Kaduna. The road stretched ahead like a ribbon of secrets. In the dim light, Naya glanced at the young woman beside her. Layla's face was calm, but her fingers kept turning the edge of the birth certificate, as if tracing proof of something she didn't want to accept. Outside, the bus lights cut through the darkness. Neither of them noticed the black sedan that had followed from a distance since they left the clinic, a vehicle whose driver had orders from Farouk Bakare himself. Find out who that nurse is, and anyone she talks to. Inside the bus, Naya whispered a prayer her mother once taught her. Let the truth travel safely, even when followed by shadows. Layla closed her eyes, clutching the paper against her chest. The road ahead was long, and danger was already on it. By the time the bus rolled into Kaduna, dawn had barely broken. The city was still half asleep, mist curling over the roads like memory refusing to fade. Naya Okoye stepped down first, scanning the quiet street. The black sedan that had followed them the night before was nowhere in sight, but she still felt watched. Beside her, Layla Musa held her bag close, the birth certificate folded neatly inside. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm underneath. Are you sure about this? Naya asked softly. Layla nodded. If I turn back now, I'll carry the same regret he did. They took a bike through back roads, avoiding the hospital's main gate. Naya had already texted one of the junior nurses to open a side entrance. The hospital compound looked different in early morning light. Quieter, almost sacred. Inside, things had changed. The staff moved under tight orders. The matron avoided eye contact, and near the ICU, 2 tall men in black suits stood like sentinels, guards hired by Farouk Bakare, the elder son who now controlled everything, including who saw his father. When Naya approached, one of the guards raised a hand. No visitors. I'm his nurse, she said. He asked for me. The man glanced at her badge. You're off duty. Layla stepped forward. Then tell him his daughter is here. The guard frowned. His what? Naya's voice was firm but calm. She's not lying. And if you block her, you'll regret it when your employer learns the truth. The men exchanged glances. One picked up a walkie-talkie. We've got a woman here claiming to be Chief's daughter, he said. Silence, then static. Finally, a single command came back. Let them in. The guard stepped aside reluctantly. 5 minutes. That was all they needed. Inside the ICU, the room was dim. Machines hummed softly, their blinking lights painting small reflections on the polished floor. On the bed lay Chief Karim Bakare, thinner now, his once strong hands trembling even in rest. When Naya whispered his name, his eyelids fluttered open. His breath came shallow but steady. She's here, Naya said gently. He blinked. She? Naya stepped aside. Layla moved forward slowly, her face pale under the white hospital light. For a moment, he only stared. Confusion melting into disbelief into something deeper. Zainab, he murmured. I'm not my mother, Layla said, voice trembling. I'm her daughter. His eyes filled instantly. Layla. She froze. The sound of her name in his cracked voice broke something inside her. He tried to sit up, but Naya stopped him gently. Easy, sir. His hand reached toward Layla, fingers shaking. You came, he whispered. I thought I'd die before. Layla stayed still. You almost did. A weak, painful smile crossed his lips. You look just like her. I get that a lot, she said. mostly from people who made her cry. He flinched, not from anger, but from recognition. "I deserve that," he said. There was a long silence. The heart monitor beeped softly between them like a metronome of unspoken words. "She never hated you," Layla said at last. "She waited, every day, until waiting became her sickness." His eyes closed. A tear slipped down his cheek. "I know. I prayed for forgiveness, but the heavens stayed quiet." "She forgave you," Layla said. "But I'm not sure I can." He nodded faintly. "You shouldn't have to. Just knowing you exist, that you lived despite me, it's enough." She stepped closer. "Why now? Why wait until you're dying to remember us?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Because when you have everything, you forget what's real. And when you start losing it, you realize love was the only thing that was never yours to buy." The door burst open. Farouk Bakare stormed in, face hard, tie loose. "What's going on here?" Naya stepped in front of the bed. "He asked for her." Farouk's gaze fell on Layla, then the birth certificate clutched in her hand. "You again. The imposter from Kagara." Layla didn't flinch. "I'm not an imposter. I'm your father's blood." Farouk laughed coldly. "My father has been sick too long to know who he's talking to. You're after his money." "She's after the truth," Naya said sharply. "Truth," Farouk sneered. "You think this is a fairy tale? This woman has no proof." Layla unfolded the birth certificate and laid it on the bedside table. "This says otherwise." Farouk's eyes darted to it, then to his father. "You forged this." Karim Bakari's voice, though weak, cut through the room. "Enough." Farouk froze. His father turned his head toward him. "She is my daughter." "No," Farouk said. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Karim said, his voice trembling with both weakness and fire. "I failed her mother. I won't fail her too." Farouk's jaw tightened. "You can't change the will now. The lawyers—" "I already did," the old man interrupted. "It's in the red folder. Top drawer." Naya quickly opened it, the one he had once pointed to. Inside were handwritten pages labeled "Final Will." On top was a note: "To be given to my lawyer after she comes." Farouk's face drained of color. "You're destroying everything we built." "No, son," his father said, voice almost breaking. "I'm saving what's left of my soul." Before anyone could respond, voices erupted outside, reporters shouting, cameras flashing through the glass. Someone had leaked the story. The guards were overwhelmed. Farouk looked at Naya, furious. "You did this." Naya shook her head. "No, but maybe lies can't stay buried forever." The flash of cameras spilled light into the room. "Is it true, Chief? Do you have a secret daughter?" shouted a voice. Layla stepped back, shielding her father from the chaos. Naya ran to close the blinds, shouting for the guards to block the door. Amid the noise, Karim's voice rose one last time. "Layla." She turned back. His eyes were wide, glassy. "Tell her," he gasped. "Tell your mother. I found peace." Then his hand went limp. The heart monitor wailed. Naya rushed forward, checking his pulse. Nothing. Layla's hands covered her mouth. "No." Outside, reporters kept shouting, unaware that the story they'd come to expose had just ended. Farouk stood frozen, staring at his father's body. His voice, when it came, was quiet, almost human. "You brought her just to watch him die." Naya looked at him, eyes calm but cold. "No. She came so he could live, even if only for a moment." Farouk turned and walked out without another word. Inside, Layla sat beside the bed, holding her father's still hand. The storm outside the hospital roared, matching the one in her chest. "I forgive you," she whispered, tears finally falling. "But I wish you hadn't waited so long." Naya stood beside her, silent. Outside the door, the world shouted for a headline. But in that small room, 2 women and 1 dead man had already written the real ending, in grief, in forgiveness, and in truth.